Welcome to Growth Hobbies podcast, where I discuss with industry expert a strategy, the way they use tools and technologies to achieve B2B success. So it is open secret now that we need to engage with the prospect. We need to connect with the buyers, and video content and podcasting is a great way. So I'm very honored to invite Mr. Jeremy, who has already created 400 plus podcasts and now helping busy entrepreneur and industry experts to create a month worth of video content just in 60 minutes. So welcome, Jeremy. I'm very honored to have you on the show. Tell me, how do you do this? How do you create in just 60 minutes a month worth of content? What is your superpower in this?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. It's great to be here. And yeah, just want to clarify, it's not 60 seconds. That would be really difficult in just 1 minute. But yeah, all right. We can help you create a month's worth of content in 60 minutes. And the way that we do that is pretty simple. So just to back up a little bit, you mentioned we really do two things. My company is called Conversa, and we do two main things. One, we do B2B podcast production. So any B2B business that wants to get into podcasting, it's a great way to network and connect and create content with your ideal customers. So that's what we do on the podcasting side. And more recently, I've started offering this service I call the interview engine. And the idea is for a busy CEO, let's say, or any business owner, it can be a solopreneur or the owner of a small business that knows they need to be out there on social media and they just don't have the time to create the content they need to do it regularly. So maybe they're posting every now and again, or they can go months without posting, and that's really not going to help you, right? So I figured there has to be a way to help people do this that's really easy and fun and enjoyable to give you enough content for an entire month with only a pretty small investment of your time. And the way that we do it is we once a month we sit down with you and we interview you about whatever you want to talk about, whatever is of most interest to your ideal clients. And then we take that content and we use it to create as many video clips as you want. And that could be eight, it could be 16, it could be 20, however many you want to stay in front of your ideal clients. And what I like about it is that it's really easy to do. So for the client, all you have to do is show up and just have a conversation. And it's kind of based on the premise that we all have all the content that we need. It's just it's in our heads. And it's not just content, it's the best content. Because the best content is content that sets you apart, right? From your competitors. You content is really no good if you're just kind of doing the same thing as everybody else. And that can be hard to avoid because you have to start somewhere. And you look around and see, well, my, 5, 10, 100 competitors are all kind of saying this. I'm going to kind of follow along because I'm not sure what else to do. But when you're being interviewed, when you're just having a conversation and responding to prompts about, so what do you do? What makes you different? That's when you can just start kind of thinking out loud about that without overthinking it, without trying to be too careful. And it's in the course of conversation, I think, that you can not only articulate like who you are and your value and what makes you different, but even to a certain extent discover that that can be a hard thing, right? For entrepreneurs. What exactly is it that we do that's different, right? Because in a lot of ways, you're probably pretty similar to your competitors, at least in your basic offerings, right? But you need to find a way to talk about that or to position that in a way that's going to help you stand out. And really, it's very simple, but I find very effective just to have someone who's willing to ask you about that and then record the conversation and kind of prompt you and help you along in thinking out loud about that. And that's where kind of the magic can happen. Without overthinking it, you just start talking and some really unique stuff flows out because we all think differently. We all have a unique way of thinking, right? Every individual is unique. And so that's the process. That's how we do it.
That's really nice. I remember when I was working with Track for Trade, we were selling a skin treatment product along with the training. I wanted to create video content. I wanted to have podcasting within the organization. So could you tell me? And we were really it was difficult. We took very long time. We didn't have that expertise. We didn't have any tools, no experience. So could you tell me, if somebody wants to start uh, new podcasting within the organization, or if they want to start a video content, how they should start? What are the tools and technologies they need? What are the challenges that they're facing?
Well, sure. I think, it obviously depends on the individual creator. There are a lot of people out there who are great at creating video content. Um, I consider myself, I don't have like some extensive background in video, so I'm mostly self-taught. But what I've learned is that with a few simple things, you can get much better video quality. So one, of course, is the equipment. Um, Having a good enough camera, and that usually means investing in an external camera. So you can just use the built-in camera on your laptop, let's say. And I guess it depends on its quality, but usually something that you can buy externally is going to give you more options and be better. So I think number one, it's worth investing in a better camera. It's important to understand at least a little bit about lighting. And, lighting can be kind of complicated. I don't think you need to invest in like a Hollywood size, lighting setup with, if you've ever seen, photos of a film set. That can get a little complicated. But you do want to have maybe some ring lights, or, you can get these things on Amazon for, $50. Like, it's not that expensive. Um, and it's good to record in a space that has good natural light too. But like for me, I record in a basement in my studio, which is in a basement, and it doesn't have a ton of natural light. So I have two lights that are pointed at me. And otherwise, if I didn't, I'd kind of be in shadows, and that doesn't look very good. And the other part of it is the audio, of course, which I actually think is, if you have to rank them, I'd even put audio first. Because if the audio is bad, if it's distorted or just has a lot of noises in it, that it makes it can make any video kind of unwatchable, even if the video itself is good. So both the audio and the video you need to have the right equipment to get that done. That's one thing. Um, but also, like, what I found in working with clients, for the interview engine, is that the equipment's only part of it. That doesn't really do much good if you don't know what to talk about in the first place. And then even if you do, to have a way to talk about it and capture it in a way that comes across, or not just comes across, but that is authentic. You don't want to create content that seems too rehearsed or overproduced, like you're reading from a script. It's usually pretty apparent when you're doing that, and that's difficult to do. To perform in front of the camera is a very specific skill, and I think a lot of people have never done it before. You might be naturally good at it, but maybe not, which again, for me, comes down to, it's so much easier and so much more natural to participate in a conversation, just like we're doing now. It just kind of flows out.
Yeah, it was so much easy. I just did a little bit of research about you, and I connected the dot that how is
Yeah.
going to be useful for my audience, and we decided on the topic together, and now we are here on a conversation. It's easy if it's natural, right?
Yeah. I think we've all come to agree that you need content, right? I mean, I think, to be honest, I think it's worth stepping back and pushing on that a little bit. Well, why do you need content? It's not just for the sake of having it, right? It's not just because that's what everyone's doing. That's not a good reason to have content, right? I think it's worth thinking through, what is my goal in creating this content specifically, you know? And to my mind, I mean, this is nothing original. I think this is pretty basic stuff, but um, you need content to represent you online. It's sort of your digital avatar online so that when you're not talking one on one with real people, that there's other versions of you out there in video, in writing that people can engage with and then want to reach out and have and connect with the real you and have a chat. I think it depends what business you're in, but at least in what I do and like in the B2B world, it all comes down to that. I know I'm not going to get a customer most likely unless they've met me and they know me and they've come to trust that I know what I'm doing and then I'm a, decent person and I'll be fun to work with and all that stuff. Um, and really that usually requires meeting people and actually having a chat and not a sales chat, just a person to person chat, getting to know the other person as a person. And the content can really help with that because, let me ask you, what's the first thing you do if somebody reaches out to you on LinkedIn and says, "Hey, I'd like to connect and, maybe get in a chat." What's the first thing that you'll probably do?
I wouldn't connect if it is just a sales speech.
Right. Well, I'm asking you, like, so unless it's someone that you can automatically tell, like, no, I don't want to have anything to do. But if someone reaches out to you and you're like, oh, well, maybe, like, what are you going to do before reaching out to them typically?
Would go to their profile and check if it's relevant to me, if it is
Yeah,
worth
you go to their
connecting,
profile,
then I
right?
will
I'm going
connect.
to say, okay, well, who is this person? What do they say about themselves? What kind of content are they putting out there? And then you might just Google them, right? You want to see what comes up. And you're going to spend at least a few minutes checking them out, and so it's to your benefit. If it's to your advantage to meet people and to build relationships and that's the way you grow your business, it's simply to your advantage to have content out there that represents you in the way you want to be represented. And that part of that, I think, ideally, is that you don't just sound like everybody else. you know if you're a vendor and you're selling whatever kind of services, then that anyone who's in the market who checks you out, they've also checked out many other people, all of your competitors, right? Probably, or a lot of them. And would you rather just kind of blend in with them and sound more or less the same, or would you rather stand out and have people go, "Huh, that's interesting. This person is memorable. I'm going to have to learn more here because they're doing something a little different." I think everybody would agree. Of course, you want to stand out, and having content that helps you stand out is part of that.
I agreed. So, what are the other tools that you use for editing uh, and producing their podcast?
Yeah,
So, when it comes to choosing tools, how would you balance the factors like tools and cost, user friendliness and features? How do you
yeah.
balance it? What is the advice that you could give the startup to prioritize and how they should select the tools?
Um, okay, so you're asking about, like which tools can like I can tell you about the tools that we use and the value I get from them. And specifically here we're talking about producing audio and video. So we use a lot of different tools. The main one we use is called Descript. I think people in the audio world especially know about Descript. And if you don't know Descript, basically what it is, it's a really cool tool. You can upload audio and video files. It'll automatically transcribe them, and then you can edit the audio and video by editing the transcript. And that's kind of its thing. That's what sets it apart. And before I discovered Descript, editing audio was just kind of a real pain in the ass, to be honest, having to go through every little bit of it and take out the ums and the ahs and the you knows if you want to do that, and I usually do. That was very painstaking and it took forever. And now with Descript, it basically automates that. You can get rid of most of that stuff with a couple of clicks or however much of it you want to. Um, and there's just something about being able to work with a transcript that's a lot easier than having to only work with a waveform, let's say. And you can use it to do video too. I would say kind of basic video editing, but if you're trying to create short clips, that sort of thing, it's perfectly good. That's what we use. And your question was about kind of balancing the cost. Yeah, versus the value. And I think that's always for any tool, right? That's always kind of going to be the equation. And it all matters on the value you're going to get. You know, if uh, I mean, the good news for business owners, I guess, or if you're in the audio video production business like us, there are a lot of options out there. So you'll find something, all the way from Pro Tools at the very top end, which can get pretty expensive, or like really complex editing software, which you may or may not need. A lot of times you don't necessarily, and Descript I find to be perfectly affordable, and there's a bit of a learning curve, but it's gotten better over time, and so we get a lot of value from it. Another tool, of course, is remote recording platforms. We're using one right now called Zencaster, and there are many others. Um, and I used to use Zencaster back a few years ago, and then I left it because at that time it was only audio, and I more and more wanted to get video, so I kind of left to other platforms. But now, of course, Zencaster's added video, so and it's very affordable, and I this is actually my first time recording on it in a little while, but it looks good. It's getting the job done, right? Then Riverside's another one, Squadcast. So there's a lot of really good, pretty low cost options out there. If you're starting a business, or let's say you want to start a podcast, doesn't have to be very expensive. And again, to my mind, the tools, the equipment, they matter, but they're not the most important thing. They're just a means to an end, but they're not the most important thing. The most important thing is creating good content, is the planning, the strategy, having the skills, and the kind of dedication to actually keeping at it and having good conversations, and that's really what it's all about.
Wow, that's really nice feature. I know that editing from the wave it becomes difficult every time you have to listen to it, uh, and it's time consuming. And editing from the transcript is going to be easy. You can just read and edit, cut that particular part. It's going to be easy. I have to check this tool for sure. So while choosing the tools, what are the features you look into it?
Yeah. So again, it very much depends on what kind of content you're creating, right? And that'll pretty much dictate what you're looking for. Um, I would say, and here, this is not me, and I don't have a ton of experience producing like very complex video. So let's say you're producing like a documentary or something, and it's 30 minutes, an hour, or whatever, and there's going to be a lot of different kinds of content that you're bringing into it and editing together. Well, there you probably want a professional video editing suite. Like Adobe Premiere comes to mind. I think that's a pretty popular one, and Apple has its own version of that. But I'm not as familiar with those, so I can't really speak to them. In terms of editing audio, let's say, and doing relatively simple video, at least for me, what I'm looking for are a few things. I want an app uh, that can do a lot, but doesn't have a very steep learning curve. So something that I'm willing to put in some time to learn it, but I don't want it to take weeks and weeks just to learn how to do the most basic things. The With some of these apps, one of the flaws can be that there's way too much going on. And so let's say you're like, for example, Logic Pro. Okay, that's an Apple product, an audio editor. And it's really a great program. I mean, I use it to edit audio, but also for music. It's really built as a music recording platform. And I'm a musician, so I write and record music. And for that, it's really great. But even still, even for that, I only use a pretty small fraction of what it can actually do, because the music I do is relatively straightforward, I guess you could say. Um, and especially if you're using it to produce podcasts, and there you're really just talking about people talking, and usually it's two people, maybe three. So something like Logic Pro, it's easy to get caught up in all the features it has, when really you're just using like two of them or three, So it's so one thing to look for in an app is simplicity. That is something that does just what you need it to do, and I do like, Descript in that way. Once you get the hang of it, it's relatively simple, straightforward. Another good one is, GarageBand. You know, if you have a Mac, comes with GarageBand. It's kind of like the free version of Logic Pro, and it's designed to be very simple and very user friendly. And again, it's designed for music recording primarily, but you can use it for any kind of audio. And I recommend that, especially if you're just starting out. It's free and it's kind of stripped down a little bit, so it makes it a little easier just to kind of get the hang of it. So that's what I'm looking for: simplicity, ease of use, a user interface that makes sense and that's intuitive. It probably the same thing you're looking for in just about any app you
Yeah,
use.
simplicity is perfect. You don't want to spend a lot of time behind learning the new a new topic and new tools. So changing tools, I know it becomes difficult for me. And in any in organization, I worked with many organizations. What I
Yeah.
find is whenever it comes with the new tools, learning new tools, nobody wants to do that. So simplicity is what everybody would look for it. I'm sure.
I think it's definitely a good idea to do your best to stay on top of what's out there. Um, it cuts both ways. You know, I think you can it's easy to waste a lot of time constantly trying new tools.
So how do you stay updated with the tools to enhance your
Okay,
experience?
no worries. You know, it's easy to waste a lot of time constantly looking at the new tools and trying every single new thing. Chances are what you're using, if it works for you, then stick with it, you know? And especially if the company that makes it updates it.
Yeah, AI tools. I'm using AI for normal content, but for video content, I'm still not using AI. I have to try. I'm looking for simplicity again, as you said. Yeah, you're right.
You know, that's okay. Then then you're probably good. Like I said, it's the tools are not the most important thing. They're necessary. They're a means to an end. But you don't want to spend too much time trying to find just the right perfect tool. There is no such thing. Find something that you like, that works for you, that you can afford, and you're good to go. Um, like one example, here's a good example of when I actually ended up kind of I wouldn't say wasting time, but spending a lot of time trying to find some AI tools because that's the new big thing, right? A lot of hype around everyone needs AI. It's going to transform everything. And AI is a very amazing technology, but it's also very new. So for example, I produce a lot of video clips and I did some research on are there AI powered apps out there that could help me do that, that could automate, a good chunk of it. And indeed there are. There are a few dozen platforms that their idea is upload from. So there are a bunch of apps out there that where you can upload a long video file and give it some prompts, and then it'll automatically chop it up into segments, short segments with captions, and then it gives you some options for changing it and putting your branding on it and that sort of thing. And I tried as many as I could find, and ultimately, I decided none of them really did what I needed to do, or none of them were quite good enough. None of them were better than what I do in Descript, which doesn't automate it. It's up to me to choose the clips. But at the end of the day, to get the quality I wanted, when I turned it over to the AI and say, you choose the clips for me, it was a little all over the map. Sometimes the choices were good, sometimes they weren't. Sometimes I was like, well, this part of this clip is good, but not the whole thing. So at least at this early stage, that's one example of I spent a lot of time looking at those tools, signed up for a bunch of free accounts, even paid for a few. And at the end of the day, I just concluded that okay, actually what I'm using now is still better. And I'm glad I checked it out because at least I know what's out there. And 6 months from now, there'll probably be a whole new set of apps, and I'll probably check those out too just to see. So again, I think as a content producer, you want to focus first and foremost on your audience. Who's my audience? if you're going to spend a lot of time on something, spend time getting to know your audience, talk to them, look at other content that they're consuming that they like. What's going on there? What do you That's what really matters most. Because if you don't know that, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what tools you're using. You're not going to create content that works because you don't know who you're creating it for.
Yeah, it's very important to talk to the customer. I make sure that I at least speak to one of my existing customer or my customer that might be my customer target audience. I try to speak with him for whatever may reason and engage what is his interest, understand them. It's very important to understand and know about them. I use a lot of tools for intent data and to understand the customer. So better we spend the time behind understanding the customer. That's absolutely agree. But again, tools makes the difference. So that is why we I decided to have the another podcast for having tools and discussing about tools as well. And here we are today. Another issue that I face is integration. For me, integration is a challenge. Even if any marketing tool I'm introducing in the organization, then integration, or it's supposed to support that particular browser. Now we are working with the remote companies, remote organizations, everybody working in a different countries. So supporting specific browser is very important. And when you're talking, I really have to try now Descript, because you said Descript is helping with the uh, editing video from the transcripts. I must try this. But I really want to ask that when can you tell me about the Descript little more, that if I have to, does it help for integration, how easy for the integration it is, and how it is uh,
So, with Descript, the browser doesn't really matter so much because there's a desktop app you can get. There is an online app which it definitely works in Chrome. I know that because that's what I use. It might work in other browsers, but the browsers more come into play with the remote recording platforms like Zencaster, Riverside. They don't always work on all browsers, so they definitely all work on Chrome. And whenever we record, we always make sure everybody's using Chrome because we know that's going to work. But Safari, I'm not sure because I don't use that one. Um, Other like Edge, I think is the Microsoft one. Other browsers, you always do want to check and make sure, because if you don't and someone connects, say, to a remote recording session and they're not on the proper browser, it might not record, or you might think it's recording, but it won't. So you do have to be a little careful and make sure you know the specifications. And once you know that, it's usually not that big of a deal. Most people, even if they don't usually use Chrome, either have it or are willing to get it, you know. So, but that is something to keep an eye on.
so we talk a lot about tools, applications, integrations. Could you tell me a funny incident that happened while recording a podcast or in your podcasting journey?
A funny experience. Okay. Well, I can definitely tell you about some kind of disastrous experiences that in retrospect are a little bit funny, but weren't funny at the time, you know. So I've had and I think all producers have had this at one point or another, where I've done an awesome interview with somebody. We've just had the best time, and then I realize at the end I wasn't recording it, or I thought I was, or somehow the recording stopped and I just didn't notice. And that's a really bad feeling in the end because you just look like a total fool, you know? So I've had that happen. It's been pretty rare. It's been a long time, but that's, that happens sometimes. I've In terms of funny experiences, that usually comes with when I'm interviewing somebody, and there's a bit of an X factor, kind of a wild card. You don't really know that often. I don't know those people that well. Like, I do a prep call usually, so I get to know them a little bit. But when they show up to do the interview, it's going to go how it's going to go, And I've occasionally interviewed some people who just turn out to be a little crazy. And I used to do a lot of science kind of content, and I'd interview scientists, which for the most part was really cool. These are very smart people who are working on some, very specific and usually pretty interesting projects. But a lot of times they're not used to talking to non-scientists or like explaining what they do to people who aren't experts. And sometimes they're really eager to talk because they're excited. So I've had interviews where we hit record, and before I can even ask a single question, I've had people just start talking and go, 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 go. And they'll just go on and on and on. And it's and as the host, like the interview, I have to find a way. It's kind of one of the skills of interviewing that you learn as the more you do it. You have to find a way sometimes to rein people in if they're just going on and kind of find a way to cut in without being really rude about it and kind of redirect and gain back control over what you're doing. And when that happens, it's never that the person's being malicious or trying to derail the interview. That's just how they talk, you know? So you have to kind of be alert. So those are a couple examples. They're not like side-splittingly funny or anything, but they've kind of stuck with me. Absolutely. If anybody wants to chat, I love jumping on a Zoom and just to chat. If I can help, that's great. Or if you just want to, we want to get to know each other, that's good too. So you can find me on LinkedIn, no problem, Jeremy Shere. You can look for Conversa, that's with two N's, Conn, versa.com. And yeah, please reach out. Always happy to